What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the T-Mobile Revvl 6 5G. Now keep in mind, this is not the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro. This is an entirely different phone. And if you want to see my comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G instead, definitely check somewhere up here in the cards because I will be linking to it there. And as always, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting a 6.56-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6, we're getting a 6.52-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. So honestly, in pretty much every way, these displays are almost exactly the same. The only real difference here is that with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we are getting that 90Hz refresh rate, whereas the T-Mobile Revvl 6 only has a standard 60Hz display. This is basically going to make the movement on the screen with the OnePlus a little bit faster and smoother, so it's going to feel a bit more premium to use, but honestly, I don't really see the difference that much. So in general, when you're actually using the phones, the experience you're going to get between the two is pretty much going to be the same. That being said though, for what they are, they're really not bad. Sure, on one hand, the images don't look super nice, but considering they're only 720p displays, I do think they are pretty decent. So if you're watching the occasional video every now and then, or maybe browsing social media, I do think they will at least get the job done. And then of course, at roughly 6.5 inches each and 20:9 aspect ratios, they are decent sized displays with pretty tall and narrow form factors. So in general, for more basic activities like social media and web browsing and stuff like that, I do think either display is going to be plenty good enough. Now for storage, both phones are getting 64GB of internal storage, and both of them do also have microSD card expansion. So on one hand, if you're really a power user, if you're constantly downloading apps, games, stuff like that, you're most likely going to want something with a bit more storage. But I would say for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, 64GB, while not being a ton of storage, is still going to be at least okay. And honestly, considering the price range of these two phones, when it comes to storage, for the money, you're probably not going to do better with anything else anyway. For security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys, so definitely great spots for a fingerprint scanner. But starting with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Revvl 6. There we go. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well. And again, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the camera setups, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6, the front-facing camera has that same water drop notch look. This camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 13 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 2K in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. So as far as the actual features go, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 does have a bit of an advantage, since again, this phone does have a macro camera, whereas unfortunately with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, besides the regular camera and the depth sensing camera to help with portrait mode, there's really nothing else there. That being said though, despite this slight advantage the T-Mobile Revvl 6 has, I do think when it comes to photo quality, the OnePlus is quite a bit better. To give you a quick idea of what it can do, here's a picture taken with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G using portrait mode, and I definitely think this picture is really high quality, especially considering this is only really just an entry-level phone. The details are nice and sharp, the lighting is realistic, and the colors look really good too. So despite not having really any features besides a regular camera, if you're really just taking pictures for maybe Instagram for example, where you might be using portrait mode, but not necessarily anything like an ultra-wide camera, in that kind of situation, I do think the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to be a great choice, because again, despite not having a whole lot of features, the actual photo quality is really good. On the other hand, here's a photo taken with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 5G. So sure, if you're just taking the occasional photo here and there for maybe social media, or just for your own memories, then it still will get the job done at least. But again, I will say, the overall photo quality we're getting with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is still quite a bit better. So in general, between the two, when it comes to the camera, I definitely think the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is quite a bit better, because even though the Revvl 6 does again have a macro camera, and it can record 2K videos, I feel like everything just looks quite a bit better on the OnePlus. But that being said, of course, if you do want a macro camera, and you want to record 2K videos, which I don't personally know anyone who does, but if you do, then the T-Mobile Revvl 6 might be a better choice. But for what most people usually do with their cameras, I feel like again, with the OnePlus, because of the camera quality, I do think you will probably get a better experience with this phone. When it comes to RAM and processor, processor with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6, we're also getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700. Now for overall performance, despite having slightly different processors, I would say in general they're about the same. In my experience, I have noticed the OnePlus to be a tiny bit faster or at least a little bit smoother in certain tasks, but really in the grand scheme of things, you're honestly not going to see a huge performance difference between these two phones. But as far as what they can do for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, they definitely will get the job done and they're not going to feel slow at all. But if you're going to be on your phone all the time, maybe doing more demanding activities like high performance mobile gaming, for example, for that kind of thing, while they might be able to handle it to an extent, they probably still will struggle a bit because being more entry-level devices, they're really not built for that kind of thing. So if you are more of a heavy user, then yeah, you're probably going to want to get something a bit higher end. But again, for more basic activities, either phone will get the job done just fine. Now, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both phones, and here are the scores I got. So again, as you can see here, the OnePlus did score a tiny bit higher, but in general, in real life, when you're actually using the phones, the difference between the two isn't really going to be that huge. For the battery, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 33 watt fast charging, and with the T-Mobile Revvl 6, this phone has a 4500 mAh battery that supports 15 watt fast charging. So on one hand, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 really doesn't have a bad battery, and I feel like for most people, the battery life we get with this phone is going to be at least acceptable. But of course, between the two, the OnePlus still does have better battery life. And in addition to this, with 33 watt fast charging versus only 15 with the Revvl 6, the OnePlus not only has a larger battery, but also charges quite a bit faster. And this phone actually does come with a 33 watt fast charger too. So in general, if battery life and charging speeds are really important to you, then the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to be a much better choice. As far as the software goes, both phones do have Android 12, which is at least decent. Sure, it's not Android 13, so if you are expecting Android 13, then you will be a little disappointed here. And in that case, I would definitely go with something like a Samsung, for example, because I'm pretty sure at this point, all the Galaxy A series phones do have Android 13, but honestly, compared to a lot of other phones, Android 12 is at least decent. So if you just want something that runs well, and you're not really too concerned about having the latest software, then either phone is going to be just fine. As far as other features go, keep in mind the OnePlus Nord N300 5G does have NFC, so you can use tap and pay with this phone, whereas unfortunately the T-Mobile Revvl 6 doesn't. Now at this point in 2023, I feel like every phone should have NFC. I mean, tap and pay is such a common feature, and sure, maybe a couple years ago, NFC was more of a novelty, but now with so many more people using it, I feel like not having NFC is definitely a big disadvantage. But again, if you do use tap and pay, keep in mind the OnePlus Nord N300 5G again does have it, but unfortunately the Revvl 6 doesn't. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Overall, in a lot of ways, these phones are actually really similar. And if you're looking for an affordable 5G phone for more basic activities, you don't necessarily need a ton of features, but you want a decent display, pretty good performance, a good camera, and a good battery, then honestly, either phone is going to be a good choice. That being said though, in pretty much every way where there's actually a difference, I would say the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is a better device. First of all, again, although the T-Mobile Revvl 6 does have a macro camera, which is a bit of an advantage if you want to get really close-up detailed images, I feel like this is really outweighed by the camera quality with the OnePlus. The photo quality with this phone is just so much better that if you're taking a lot of pictures, it will make a pretty big difference. In addition to this, the OnePlus has a much better battery that not only is a bit larger, but also charges quite a bit faster. And again, this phone does have NFC, so you can use tap and pay with this phone, whereas unfortunately you can't with the T-Mobile Revvl 6. So overall, if you want the best value between the two, then although the OnePlus Nord N300 5G at full price at least is a little bit more expensive, I do think for what we're getting here, it definitely is worth it. But this concludes my comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the T-Mobile Revvl 6 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.